Hi guys, today we'll be looking at a very famous opening called the Slav Defence. So this is basically against the Queen's Gambit if you aren't comfortable playing the Queen's Gambit and you don't want to go in the basic Queen's Gambit variation, then this is a good uh, defense to use for black. It's basically rejecting the Queen's Gambit. There are like three main variations for it. We'll look at all three of them. So let's start with the first one. So white moves pawn to d4, black responds with pawn to d5, and white does the uses the queen's gambit. So he's sacrificing the pawn, which is why it's called the queen's gambit. So the general response for black is either taking the pawn, or most commonly it's e6, but instead of e6 we'll be playing the c6, pawn to c6. This is the Slav defense, while pawn to e6 is the French defense. Sorry, Queen's Gambit. Uh, pawn to c6 is the Slav defense. So the main difference between the e6 and c6, both are supporting this pawn. The main difference is now our bishop has our white square bishop has an open line, so that it can come here and attack this diagonal. So white takes and black takes. So this is known as the exchange variation. This is like the most basic variation, and now it's like normal when now uh, both black and white will try to develop pieces and then soon control the center. So this is a very basic opening. Let's look at the second one. Pawn to d4, pawn to d5, c4, pawn to c6. Instead of taking it, white moves knight to f3, black moves knight to f6, and then white moves knight to c3, adding the pressure onto this pawn, but black is not concerned as he has enough supports. So now black will start exchanging. So now black has currently an advantage. So there are two variations. You can either move pawn to e4. This is an attack, like it's a more aggressive variation. So next black will move a pawn to b4 to support this pawn and to keep hold of his advantage. The main point of the c4 is, although you won't be getting your pawn back uh, uh, quickly, you are having more center control than black, but a more recommended opening move is pawn to a4. What this does is it prevents black from moving pawn to b5. So now he can't support this pawn. So white has kind of like taken control of this pawn. So it's recommended to play that. So then black responds with bishop to f5, controlling this diagonal, and white would actually love to move his pawn to e4, but now as the diagonal bishop comes here, he can't, as there are two supports and just two attacks and just one support. The bet like if the bishop wasn't there, this would have been a brilliant move for white, because now he has more center control and it's opening the line for this bishop, so he can take back his pawn and develop the bishop simultaneously. So this has like three advantages, but now with black moving bishop to f5 and controlling the spot, that prevents white from moving pawn to e4. So instead of moving pawn to e4, white moves pawn to e3. So now the bishop can develop and get back the pawn. So black just responds with pawn to e6. The main reason for this is to develop the black squared bishop, and white just responds with uh, bishop to c4, taking back the pawn, and black would move bishop to b4, pinning the knight, and just to not have this knight pinned, white would kingside castle. So now the knight is no more pinned, and then you black can continue developing his knight to d7, and now black can castle either kings or queenside, but kingside is recommended. So this is the second variation. This is the most common variation. Now let's look at the final variation. So the final variation, so knight to f3, knight to f6. So we know that later on white moves pawn to e3 to open this uh, bishop, the line to bishop, and take back the pawn. But in this variation, white does this way earlier and moves pawn to e3. So now he's directly at supporting this pawn. So whenever black takes, white will just take back the pawn with his bishop. So black responds with bishop to f5, controlling this strong diagonal for black, and then white takes and black takes. So this also a pretty basic variation where now uh, you start developing pieces and trying to control the center. But the main variation is the second variation that I was talking about. That's the main Slav defense variation. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe for more chess videos. Thank you.